Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Today on Oklahoma Gardening, I'll show you how to get your transplants ready to go outside. We pot up a beautiful spring container, prep our lawn for the spring green up, and then I'll introduce you to a spring flowering shrub you might want to add to your landscape. Finally, Jessica Riggin is back with a delicious soup. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Like an ombre of sunset colors. It's not the flowers, right? It's the beginning of April, and I know this is the time we all get antsy to start putting our tomatoes and peppers out in the garden. You want to hold off, really, depending on where you are in the state of Oklahoma, until about mid-April. Of course, southern Oklahoma is going to get warmer faster than northern Oklahoma, so you may be able to plant a little bit sooner in the month of April. Really, the best thing to do, though, is check your weather forecast, your 10-day forecast, and see what the forecast is predicting as far as warm weather or cooler fronts moving in still. Because our warm season crops will not like cooler temperatures. So be patient, it's definitely going to pay off. However, there is something that you can do with your transplants. If you've been growing them, you can see we have peppers that are ready to get out into the garden, but we're not going to plant them just yet. First of all, we want to do what's called hardening them off, and that is basically pushing our babies out of the nest, in essence. Here in the greenhouse, they've been receiving the ideal conditions. You can see there's no wind in here. They're getting plenty of sunlight. They've been getting watered regularly, and so they've been just growing great, which is what you want to provide for new transplants and also to get those seedlings germinated. We want to give them the best care to get them off to the proper start. However, when we plant them out in the garden, they're going to be exposed to all new sorts of environments. So we want to go ahead and start transitioning them, acclimating them to those environmental factors that they're going to experience. And so the best way to do that is go ahead and take them outside just for a few hours. So you can see here I've got a garden cart that I'm just going to load up our transplants and just take them outside so that they can start to experience what life is going to be like once they're moved outdoors. When you move your transplants outdoors, you don't necessarily want to put them in full sun. Even though they might have been growing under a grow light inside or even in the greenhouse, what they're going to experience outdoors in partial sun is going to be about equivalent because they're not used to the intense, bright, full sun of the afternoon. So early morning, put them out for a few hours or a few hours in the afternoon, and each day sort of expand that range that they're outdoors in order to acclimate them and get them used to the brighter sun. The other thing is you can slowly take them further and further out of the shady area and put them in more sun as well. So to start off, you might find a shady tree. Even a deciduous tree that's lost its leaves is going to provide some of that dappled shade. Perhaps a covered porch or a patio would also work as well. Now, the other thing you're going to notice about these plants is they're already starting to experience some of those Oklahoma winds that are kind of brushing their vegetation. And that's going to actually dry them out faster than maybe what they were in their previous location. So we do want to make sure that we're still checking them for moisture. However, letting them be a little bit thirsty, not to the point of wilting, but allowing them to experience that thirst just a little bit is going to get them used to the outdoor environment. Because again, once you plant them out into the garden, they're going to have a lot more soil to grow into that you're going to have to monitor. So having them in a cart like this allows you to kind of monitor them more closely before you plant them in the garden. Now I'm going to kind of spread these out a little bit so that they experience a little more of that wind, but I'm going to leave them on this cart so that I can simply roll them back indoors when I need to. You want to make sure to check the weather. If the temperature is going to be mild that evening, you might go ahead and leave them outside, because not only do we need to get them used to the sunlight, but they still might experience some cooler nights. Now we want to make sure that they're not too cold. If the temperature does get into the 40s or 50s, you might want to go ahead and bring them back in for that evening. Another thing that you can do to kind of get them ready for those Oklahoma winds is you can actually put an oscillating fan on them. So occasionally that will go past them, causing them to have disturbance, and again, kind of build up that strength and prepare them for our outside winds. So all of this again is just kicking those little babies out of the nest, preparing them for that full sun garden location where they're going to be exposed to more winds and also bright sunlight. This process is called hardening off, and you want to do this about a week or two before you plant your vegetable garden. Today we're potting up some spring containers, and we aren't quite in full spring yet, so we still have to be cautious of some cool nights. In fact, earlier today it was in fact showing some flurries outside. So the nice thing about potting something up like this is kind of a fabric container smart pot, is that this one has handles. So if we have some cooler nights, I could still drag this inside and protect it. Now, what we are planting today is primarily perennials, so we're not too much concerned, but you know, they've kind of been used to warmer conditions being in a greenhouse. So first of all, we've got our container here that we've chosen. We've got a rather larger container. This is about a 15-gallon pot here. And we've got about 2/3 of it filled with potting soil already. Now I leave that extra space because as we put our containers inside there, they're naturally going to take up a lot of this surface area and this space in here. So we actually won't need to put as much potting soil around there. And it's just easier. If you were to fill it all up with potting soil, you're going to actually be having to take it out in order to get your plants in there. So once you put a little potting soil in there, we're next going to go ahead and put in some slow release fertilizer that we have here. That's just going to help get these plants off to a good start as they continue to grow through the season. So we're going to go ahead and work that into the soil, the potting soil here. Again, it's always something to remember when you're potting into containers. You never want to use topsoil. You always want to use a potting soil media, because that is made so that it drains better than your traditional soil that you have in the garden. So here is one plant that I just really couldn't help but get at the garden center, and this particular one is a knockout rose. And I know we're all very familiar with knockout roses, but this is actually a petite knockout rose, and it's kind of noted for its distinctive fire engine red, smaller flowers than what you traditionally see on some of your other knockout roses, and then I just really like the contrast with this dark emerald green foliage. Obviously it is petite, so it's going to stay smaller at about 18 inches tall and 18 inches wide. So this is going to be our centerpiece here in our container. And when you're kind of designing a container, you want to think about how it's going to be viewed. Is it just going to be viewed from one side, which is what we're planning on this? It's just going to be viewed from your angle here. You might look at whether you want it to be viewed from all around. If you want it to be viewed from all angles, then you want to make sure that you're putting something on every side of that container. Because ours will just be viewed from one angle and it'll be up against a wall, we're really going to focus on this front side and kind of creating more of a cascade of color coming down towards you. So this one that's 18 inches tall is going to be our centerpiece that we're going to put more towards the back of the plant or the container here. When you take something out of the container, you're going to want to look at the roots obviously as well. So you can see we have nice root structures. They're not circling or anything. You could go ahead and tease those a little bit. If they were densely rooted, you definitely want to tease those to make sure that you open it up, allowing for those roots to know they're in a bigger container so that they will continue to grow down into this potting media. So ours looks good. We're gonna go ahead and place it right here. You can see where the height of that is going to be just below our container. So that's about good. So we can set that there. Next, what we have is a Sally Rosa April Night Salvia. So we're gonna again just gently pull this out of the pot. Anytime you pull a plant out of the pot, what you want to do is kind of put the plant in between your hands or your fingers and flip that pot over and allow gravity to pull it out. You might want to kind of crush the container a little bit, causing it to flex a little bit, squeezing those roots, and gently it will fall out of the container. You don't necessarily want to pull on the vegetation and pull it out of the container because that can damage your plant. Now this April Night's Salvia is said to be a longer bloomer than the May Night Salvia, so we're looking forward to seeing that, but of course it has those well-noted salvia spikes that are going to continue to bloom. And we're going to put these kind of on either side of flanking this rose here. And of course our rose is smaller at the time being right now, but as it grows it will get bigger and fill this pot even more. And then in the front here we've got a few different options that we're going to work with. So we've got this Fort Hill creeping phlox that we're going to have kind of draping down the front. You can see those white healthy roots. We've got a good establishment of roots here. Again, I'm just going to sort of tease those, pull those apart. And this is going to go down more in our front here. Now when I was looking at this, I kind of was thinking I needed something with a little more pop to it as I was putting these colors together. So I found this yellow alyssum that I really liked. Again, alyssum tends to be more of a spring bloomer, but a lot of these are. Our rose and our salvia will continue to bloom a little bit further into the season. But I like to just have a lot of color right as we're coming into the season. If anything, this will definitely help our pollinators get off to the start before a lot of other stuff starts blooming. So we will have these ready to go as soon as we start seeing those pollinators show up. So I'm just going to place those in there. I've got 3 that I'm going to put around. Now this alyssum, you do want to go ahead and deadhead it later on just to kind of replenish that vegetation. So after it is kind of blooming, go ahead and cut that back. But at that point, our rose is going to be getting bigger and it's going to be taking on more of an appearance in this container. And tuck those in. And this is getting pretty tight in here. So like I said, we don't have a lot of room, but we do have some space that I'm going to go ahead and put some potting soil and fill in between all of these spaces. So I think we pretty well have it all filled in with soil in between all of those plants. You can see it's pretty packed in here. Now again, this is so we've got plenty of flower and color for those pollinators early in the season. And in fact, we might not even be putting this outside just yet because it is still good and cool here in north central Oklahoma. But what's nice about this, even though these phlox and these smaller alyssums are probably going to fade later on in the season, as the rose continues to grow, we'll be able to pull these out and we could plant the phlox somewhere else in our garden so it'll continue to give us a nice show. It is a perennial, so next spring we'll be able to enjoy it somewhere else. So there's no reason why you can't transition some of these perennials once they're past their prime out into your garden, and this container could just turn into a beautiful miniature rose container later on in the season. So if you're looking at planting containers, here's a great option to transition perennials from your containers to your garden later in the season. Times in late winter, we talk about cutting back ornamental grasses to remove that dead vegetation in order to prepare for that spring flush that's going to soon be coming out. Well, the same is true with our warm season bermudagrass. pretty soon it's going to be spring, and we're going to need to get rid of some of this nice, beautiful blonde color that it takes on in the wintertime as it's dormant. But by removing some of this dead material, we're going to allow that sun to penetrate onto that soil profile, warming it up sooner, getting those rhizomes and those stolons activated to start growing. Now you can see here we have a bagger on ours, so we are going to collect the vegetation. Now normally we don't recommend collecting your clippings because they actually add some nitrogen typically. However, this is dead vegetation, so we are going to remove it. If you don't have a bagging unit on your mower, you can also just rake the clippings up. Now we're going to lower our mower all the way down to a 1-inch height. Typically with common Bermuda grass, we're going to start mowing around 1.5 to 2.5 inches later in the season. However, again, to get it cut low, we're going to start at a 1-inch height. Now, of course, mowing at a 1-inch height means those blades are going to be right near that soil surface. So we want to be cautious as we're mowing, because we're more likely to even scalp the Bermuda grass, which is what we do not want to happen. That is when those blades actually interfere and damage those soil surface and can damage the stolons and the rhizomes of the Bermuda grass. So not only will it damage your Bermuda grass, but it also could impact your mower by dulling your blades or even causing some additional problems. So we want to steer clear of that. Usually it's not a problem if you're working on a flat surface, but be careful on uneven lawns, and also especially, as you can see, we have some hills behind us here, and on the crest of those, a lot of times that's where you'll get some of that scalping. So be careful with that. Now again, we've lowered our mower to a 1-inch height. So this is the only time that we're going to mow this low in the season, and that's just to get rid of this dead vegetation. After we mow today, we're going to then go ahead and raise our mower for common Bermuda grass up to about a 1.5-inch height. And then later on in the season, as the temperatures warm up even more and the Bermuda grass is really growing, we'll be up to about a 2.5-inch height later on in the summertime. So that is a little bit taller height, which is more of a low maintenance mowing program. That's going to allow the canopy of the Bermuda grass to actually shade out the roots a little bit, not causing any problems, but actually to reduce the moisture loss. And so you won't have to mow it quite as often. Now on some of your cultivars or your hybrid Bermuda grasses, such as Tahoma 31, Latitude 36, and Northbridge, now some of those are going to need to remain being mowed at about a 1 to 1.5-inch height. Now remember, just because we're collecting our clippings this time doesn't mean it needs to go to the curbside to be picked up with your trash. These clippings are actually really beneficial to add into your compost pile. We have a lot of great early spring flowering trees and shrubs that you're probably noticing this time of year, including a lot of our fruit trees bloom early in the springtime. Well, today I wanted to introduce you to another flowering shrub that blooms early in the spring, and this actually is in the Prunus genus. However, it is not grown for edible reasons. We actually grow it more for ornamental purposes, but this is our flowering almond shrub. Like I said, it is in the Prunus genus. However, being ornamental, the maintenance is a little bit lower than what you might find on a lot of your fruit trees. You can see as it just comes out of dormancy, it's going to have these little flower buds all over it, and it seems like overnight they're going to explode into these beautiful double flowers. So they start out kind of a bright pink, and then they slowly fade to more of a bright white color. But it's a double flower, almost like a rose-like flower. There is a cultivar that is just a white cultivar. However, this particular cultivar is called Rosia. So you can see how many flowers just cover the branches, and it's a beautiful addition to your landscape. Now, because it's blooming early in the springtime, we do know that that means it's blooming on old wood. So all of these flower buds were developed last season. So we want to make sure if for any reason we need to prune it, we're going to prune it after it blooms in a few weeks. The other thing, you don't have to really prune it too much, because it's going to maintain a moderate height of about 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide. While it's not native to the United States, it was actually noted by Thomas Jefferson in 1794 in some of his writings, so it's been around in the United States for a long time and is in fact the host larva plant for the Eastern Tiger Swallowtail. So another great plant to add to your landscape if you're looking for early spring blooming plants is the flowering almond.
Hi everybody. Today I am going to be showing you how to make a really quick 10 vegetable soup, and we're just going to start with a little bit of olive oil, and my pan is already heating on the stove, and I'm just going to put a little olive oil in there. And to this I'm going to add most of my 10 vegetables. In this bowl I've got a whole diced yellow onion. In this bowl I've got 3 diced carrots. In this bowl, I've got 3 stalks of celery, all diced up. And in this bowl, I've got 1 yellow bell pepper, 1 red bell pepper, and 1 poblano pepper, all diced up. We'll just give these a little stir, and it's going to take probably 5 to 8 minutes for these to get soft. At this point, you might want to add a little salt and pepper. I've got a salt and pepper blend here. And then just let them cook until they've softened. So it's been about 5 minutes and my vegetables are looking pretty soft. So now I'm going to add in my garlic. Garlic burns really, really fast. So you're just going to put the garlic in, and as soon as you smell the garlic, it's probably ready to go to the next phase. Once you're smelling the garlic, and it usually only takes about 30 seconds, it's probably about to burn. So stir that garlic in. And then I'm going to add in some tomato paste, about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. And we'll give that a good stir as well. You want to cook the tomato paste for 3 or 4 minutes so that it gets kind of the raw canned tomato flavor cooked out of it. All right, once that's good and incorporated, we'll add in just a little bit of vegetable stock. So my box here is actually 4 cups, and we're going to use the whole thing. But I'm going to start by pouring just a little bit in there to deglaze my pan. So deglazing your pan, you would pour a little liquid in and then use your spatula to kind of scrape up anything that's burned to the bottom of your pot, anything that's sticking there. And all of that adds really great flavor to your soup. Once I've deglazed the pan, I'll go ahead and pour the rest of my stock in. Now I've got 1 box of vegetable broth, and I've also got a box of chicken broth. You could do 2 boxes of vegetable broth. You could do 2 boxes of chicken broth. It's really just your preference. I like the flavor of the chicken broth, and that's why I put it in here. But of course, it's no longer vegetarian this way. So if you want your soup to be vegetarian, then just add 2 boxes of the vegetable broth. And give that a stir, and we want to let this come to a boil. And once it's starting to boil, I am going to add in a cup of lentils and a cup of frozen corn. So our soup is starting to boil, and I'm going to add in my cup of frozen corn and my cup of lentils. And just give them a little stir. And these lentils will cook pretty quickly, probably another 15 minutes. And then we'll add in some baby spinach, and this soup will be ready to eat. So our soup has been boiling for about 15 minutes. I think our lentils are done. So I'm going to season this with a little bit of paprika and some thyme and a little bit of cumin. And at this point, I am also going to add in our baby spinach. Now, adding in spinach is tricky. It takes up a lot of space at first, but then as it wilts down, it doesn't take up much space. So just add it in a little bit at a time. So you just add some in, stir it, add some more until you get it all in there. Then once the spinach has wilted down, the soup is done. This would be wonderful for your family on a cold evening or for lunch someday. I hope you'll try the recipe and I hope you enjoy.
There are a lot of great horticulture activities this time of year. Be sure and consider some of these events in the weeks ahead. As we put a little more time into our garden, next week we take a unique look at some locations you might want to consider when landscaping. Plus, we take a closer look at some of the plants that are beginning to sprout up, both in the garden and in the lawn.
You just shine a little light on the situation.
This is all going to just fall over here in a minute.
I don't know if that table can handle much more.
To find out more information about show topics as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure to visit our website at oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. Tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater gem. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Tulsa Garden Center at Woodward Park, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, Smart Pot, and the Tulsa Garden Club.